And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. This is Dr. Rosemary Miles, and she's a licensed clinical psychologist and licensed marriage and therapy counselor. And she's working from Davis, California. She specializes in helping others heal from trauma and helping couples create safe and satisfying, lasting bonds of connection. And she's also a wonderful greeter at our spiritual center, spreading light and love. Please put your hands together. And she's going to be talking about, her talk is Self-Compassion, the Most Powerful Path to Peace. Put your hands together for Rosemary.
Hello, everybody. It's great to see your beautiful faces. And thank you so much to RJ and JG and all the helpers that have created this wonderful forum where people can express and in their unique medium, their divinity. I think RJ or JG already told you that I'm a psychologist, I'm a healer, so work a lot with people with trauma and couples in creating secure connections. So I've chosen a topic today, and what I'm hoping to do is share with you my journey and evolution to self-compassion, which is something that you don't just arrive at. As you probably know, it's an ongoing journey and very essential to our spiritual development and to world peace. 4 angels or soul teachers helped me get to where I am today. And we all have those teachers in our lives. They're usually people, relationships that bring us great joy, but they also can bring us great suffering and great pain. And they help carve us like a beautiful sculpture over the years to where we evolve. First, a little bit about compassion and self-compassion. So we're going to do a little head stuff and then drop down into an intimate story and more heart stuff. So to just give you a little bit of background, mindful compassion, according to Paul Gilbert, a British researcher who talked about compassion, the simplest definition evolves from the Buddhist tradition. It is sensitivity to suffering. Sensitivity to suffering in ourselves and others with a deep motivation and commitment to alleviate and prevent it. However, it gets a little tricky in applying compassion to ourselves. How many people in this room at one time in their life even had a little bit of a thought that self-compassion might mean self-indulgence, being kind of selfish and self-centered? Thank you for being honest. Yeah, absolutely. So, according to Kristin Neff, who wrote the book Self-Compassion, self-compassion is wanting health and well-being for myself and being proactive rather than passive to care for the self. It also says, I am worthy. I am worthy and as important as you are for caring for myself. Some of the dilemma is that in Euro-Western cultures and many other cultures across the globe, we are taught to be self-sacrificing and to be kind to others, but not necessarily to ourselves. And this becomes, over the years, this may result in being harsh and critical and developing that real critical part that we sometimes call the judge or the critic in our heads that drive us. My point is that self-compassion has a biological necessity. Did you know that when you talk to yourself kindly, it actually releases a chemical in our body called oxytocin? And oxytocin is the bonding attachment neurochemical. When we hug our child, when we hug and stay with hugs even for a minute with each other, we're doing something for our health. We're really helping ourselves in terms of health benefits of oxytocin. On the other hand, when we're very critical inside, our body's threat system gets activated, the sympathetic nervous system. So even when I'm talking to myself in a very harsh way, chemicals like cortisol and other chemicals are released inside, the same kind of chemicals that our body releases when we were mammals. We saw tigers in the wild, and those chemicals helped us survive. But they really don't help us very much now when internally we talk to ourselves in a very critical way. And what ends up happening is when cortisol is released in small doses over many years, chronically it creates inflammation, and inflammation is the precursor of disease. So actually, when you're working on really transforming that critical voice, and you have guides or helpers to do that, you're really helping your entire health. It's not just your mental health, it's your physical health, because we know mind, body, spirit, everything is all connected. In 2015, I attended a 4-day retreat on mindful self-compassion in New Mexico, based on the work of Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer. And it was a retreat that was very much, very transformative in some of the concepts that I'm giving you today in the benefits of mindful self-compassion. And when I end this talk today, I'll give you one of the exercises in enhancing self-compassion that we did at that workshop. So now transitioning to my 4 soul teachers. The first one you're going to hear about helped me build a wall to turn away from suffering in order to survive as a child. The second person helped me tear down the wall from intense grief and becoming able to open to pain to myself and other people. The third individual, third soul teacher, helped me learn that there was no quota on suffering, that no quota on loss. Oh, I did that already. I lost, the closest person to me. Well, I thought I had gone through everything, but there was no quota on it. And the last softened me into both compassion and self-compassion. Soul teacher number 1 helped me build the wall was my father. He prepared me to take on his past conditioning and deepen my negativity bias that manifested as severe self-judgment. But he also taught me resilience. So what do I mean by negativity bias? It's just a lens of constantly seeing the negative that, again, we as mammals have developed so we can protect ourselves from the next danger around the corner. But that is also not adaptive if it's overused. I'm very much like him in physical appearance and in my temperament. My father was an Italian immigrant who brought gifts of loving knowledge, learning the arts, and a deep love of science to me. However, he had unresolved childhood trauma and pain that he found very difficult to manage, with outrages, physical abuse, and lots of stuff that I had to bear as a little girl and watch. And I had to suppress a lot of those feelings and come to terms with them. But I ended up with a feeling of, I'm not that worthy. You know, that these are common negative beliefs that so many of us end up with in terms of shame cycles. I'm not good enough. I coped by excelling academically and excelling in a lot of things, so I had a lot of adaptive abilities to kind of cope with that, but it was painful. Upon college graduation, I listened to my inner voice, even at 22, and I'm very grateful for that. I took a ride with some friends from New York City, and got in the car, and they said, "You want to go to California?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds really good." And I got my degree from State University at Stony Brook, and I took a ride with some friends across the country and landed in Los Angeles. And there would be many trips back and forth to heal that relationship with my father and my mother. Many, but that began a journey for me where I was beginning to feel the freedom that I could create, that I had a clean slate to begin to create a new palette other than the one of self-judgment and pain. So before reaching that place, my second and third soul teachers would have done their jobs. Grief and loss would bring down the wall I had created with a loud shatter. Soul teacher number 2 was my first partner. And from age 25 to 33, I explored life with my first partner. We climbed mountains and traveled. He helped me open my body, the natural world, and laughing, humor. We climbed Mount Fuji. He helped me all the way, telling me it was just around the other bend to just look at the mountaintop. And it worked because we got there. And when we reached the crown of Japan above the clouds, I drenched myself in that feeling of exuberance and awe, drinking deeply in a sense of oneness with the earth, connection to my body, and most of all, gratitude that I was inspired, that he had inspired me to shift my thoughts during those challenging hours. Then after 8 years together growing up during our 20s and 30s, he was killed suddenly. He was killed in a risky mountaineering adventure in the Eastern Sierras, climbing on a weekend with a buddy. His death shattered most of the ways I had learned to protect myself. I went from many years in my head to connecting with my body. It was my first major loss, and for many of us, that first major loss of somebody deeply dear to us is like no other. Ram Dass says, "Your own suffering, be it loss, grief, or physical pain, hurts like hell. You see the way that suffering forces your awakening. It's hard to imagine a spiritual curriculum," he says, "in which Suffering 101 is not part of the course for becoming a full human being." Allowing myself to fully open to the pain of my grief gave me great empathy at age 33 to the pain and suffering of others. This pain, although leaving me raw, planted the seeds for compassion in my later years. Soul teacher number 3, my second partner, Robert Miles. My second soul teacher, actually he was my third soul teacher, taught me that turning away from suffering and diving into shame can kill us. Brené Brown says shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are even capable of change. Robert, or Bob, was in my social world all through my first partner's death. He was a colleague I admired. I admired him for his work in social justice, for his work as an activist in the civil rights movement. And we owned a business together in Palmdale, California. He was a mental health professional, a doctoral student, and we formed a company helping individuals return to work after they had experienced chronic illness and extreme disabilities. He's my son's father. It became very apparent that Bob had a drinking problem. After 6 years of marriage with a 5-year-old child and 2 chemical dependency interventions, I had to ask him to leave our home. Caught in an addiction spiral, he was later found on the street. He died in a hospital bed in critical care, not being able to survive detox. Once again, it was hard to believe that I was saying goodbye to a second partner. Again, no quota on loss. I was angry for a long time, so enraged for so long, feeling left again, and mostly empathizing with my dear son, who needed him so much. Losing more than one partner at the age of 41, I felt different. This was a turning point. We all come to them in our lives. I could use emotional pain for positive transformation or collapse in despair. In the years following, my spiritual journey would inspire me to spend many years in the martial arts, developing resilience in mind, body, and spirit. I completed a doctoral degree, and my study was about multiple widowhood, or losing more than one partner at an early age, and how it influences identity and meaning construction. The narratives of the women I interviewed around the country served as a healing balm to take me to a new level of deeper compassion, not only for myself, but for my late second husband, who truly died of both shame and a biopsychosocial disease we call alcoholism. Soul teacher number 4, my dear and beautiful son, Martin. When a loved one is in emotional and spiritual pain, especially a child, it is painful. To sit in our own helplessness and sadness and fear for our survival without fixing is truly one of the most challenging paths for spiritual growth we will ever take. If we're parents and we've been in that place of helplessness, then you know what I'm talking about. It's one of the most profound spiritual journeys you will ever take, to sit in our emotions, not fix, and really surrender and trust. This has been my dojo, or learning lab, for the past 8 years. My son is a talented musician and spiritually questing being who is striving now to heal from his experiences and many early losses. In the midst of his soul struggle and watching his attempt to resolve his pain, his proximity to my heart has forced me to a new chapter, hence coming to the place of seeking peace through mindful self-compassion, through the Buddhist path of mindfulness. So in closing, remember, amplifying the inner voice of self-compassion is a long-term path to peace. We will always be challenged. My 4 soul teachers prepared the way for me to be exactly where I am, here and now. In gratitude to my father, who taught me how humans create suffering and also gave me the tools for resilience. In gratitude to my first partner, who taught me to open to grief, go into the pain, and welcome transformation, however difficult. In gratitude to my second partner, whose death reminded me that we have no quota on loss or suffering, and that shame drives us away from our pain. Finally, in gratitude to my son as soul teacher, who brought me to the path of mindfulness, self-compassion, to sit with discomfort and uncertainty. May you find gratitude from your soul teachers and for the moment we have arrived at right now. My wish for the world is that we each have the courage to do our inner healing. And boy, do we need that now. Do our inner healing to arrive at compassion for the self. What a peaceful world it truly would be. Namaste.